Sometimes it's the way ships are designed that turns a simple human error into a catastrophe. A chemical tanker was discharging when the chief officer was called by the terminal.
Command 63.
Yes, this is ship.
Stand by here. We're trying to spot it right now.
They wanted to top off some shore tanks. So he did as they asked and reduced pumping pressure. He called the terminal to confirm that he'd done it.
Master, we reduced the speed. Over.
Moments later, he was distracted again.
Look, Chief, we're never going to get number 5 finished before you settle, so can you have a look at it?
Okay,
He left the radio behind. Then, the engineer left the room, knocking a pump control lever fully on.
Command 63.
The terminal tried to alert the ship. In vain. Normally, a seaman monitored the pressure gauges at the manifold. But he'd been called away to help set up a backup pump because one of the cargo pumps had failed.
I said one more.
The chief officer returned too late to stop a shoreline failing. The cleanup cost $250,000. Pollution incidents are infrequent, but costly. Where did things go wrong in this case? There were failures in design, communication, organization, and defenses. The active failure was the accidental increase in pumping pressure. But the incident would never have occurred if the console had been designed to prevent the controls being moved unintentionally. Leaving the radio in an empty control room led to a basic failure of communication. There was a built-in defense, the man monitoring the pressure gauges at the manifold. But crew numbers that are just enough when all goes to plan can't always cope with the unexpected. In fact, the master had previously reported the faulty pump to the ship's managers. They decided to postpone repairs until the next dry docking. They didn't realize how serious the consequences could be. In our final case, the pilot was late.
Third job today already, so...
When he arrived, it was the first surprise the master would have that night.
Case, Bucker.
Case.
Leslie, long time no see. When was that?
Manila.
Manila, yeah.
It's all right, second mate. We don't need that. It's Case Backer, his old shipmate.
The tide was ebbing fast, so they lost no time getting underway.
Bridge forward, bridge aft, pilots on board, single up 1 and 1 each end.
Soon they were following a zigzag track between the islands of the delta. The second officer did her best to keep an eye on their progress, even though it seemed to amuse the old salts.
After sort of...
Then a light she'd been expecting to see didn't show up.
-3 golf balls. It's all in.
No.
One that could not be easily missed on a clear night like that. Or could it? she supposed it was out of order. The pilot would know that, of course. But the doubt wouldn't go away. And the second officer plotted another GPS position. It showed they'd missed a wheelover point and were moments away from running aground. The ship was hardly scratched, but damage to the coral reef cost $500,000. The increase in incidents attributed to pilot error is a matter of concern. But pilots don't work on their own. Where did things go wrong in this case? There were error-enforcing conditions and failures in communication and organization. Commercial pressures act on pilots as well as ship staff. Time was on nobody's side. Was it that, or other factors that made two experienced mariners negligent? In an ideal world, masters would brief pilots about the handling characteristics of their ships, and pilots would detail their plans before the handover takes place. In the real world, the pilot conference often amounts to little more than a handshake. But commercial pressures don't do away with the need to exchange this information. It makes open communication between pilots, masters, and officers even more vital. Does it really happen? Canada's Transportation Safety Board thinks not. It asked hundreds of masters and pilots, "Do you communicate well?" Yes, said 80% of both groups. So, do pilots tell masters their plan? 51% of pilots said yes. Only 24% of masters agreed. Do masters explain how their ship handles? 75% said yes, but only 19% of pilots agreed. Question after question confirmed that the perceptions of each group were in conflict. Why? Perhaps the masters assumed the pilots knew all about their ship. Maybe the pilots believed the masters were familiar with the waters. The researchers' conclusion: neither group expected to give much information or receive much in return. On the bridge, a keep-it-to-yourself culture can only lead to calamity. That's because communication is the driving force of teamwork, and teamwork is essential to safe navigation. No one can play a full part in the bridge team until the master champions open communication. Each member must feel free to challenge the assumptions, actions, or inaction of another whenever there's a concern about safety. The second officer wasn't alone in failing to speak up. 51% of masters claimed that they, their officers, and the pilot always work as a team. Yet 77% of their officers said they were reluctant to question pilots' decisions. Instead of second-guessing the pilot, the second officer should have made sure she knew his intentions. The master should have insisted on the ship's passage plan being berth to berth, not pilot station to pilot station. If the pilot had briefed the bridge team properly, they could have monitored progress step by step and supported his decision-making. That would also maintain their situational awareness, so they could tackle an emergency with no time wasted getting their bearings. The sea is a high-risk environment. So is the market ships trade in. Fierce competition means low freight rates, and that often means lean crews. While there are fewer people to do it, operating a ship needs more skills than ever. The opportunities for error are great, and the consequences costly and far-reaching. To overcome this threat, all concerned must operate at peak performance. Fatigue rules that out. That's why it pays dividends to match manning levels to operational needs. Struggling on manfully and fudging the working hours puts the ship and the entire crew at risk. Fatigue training is to become compulsory. In the meantime, guidelines are available from the IMO and the US Coast Guard. Boredom and low morale are powerful enemies of performance, but there are always ways to prevent them. Make the best of the available accommodation. Respect ethnic preferences. Enable seafarers to keep in touch with home. And develop their potential to give them the prospect of continuing employment and promotion.
Moving backward and forward or sideward or something like that, because otherwise the driver cannot see us behind.
But however well motivated, a man alone is at the greatest risk from human error. That's why communication and teamwork are vital, and not just on the bridge. A pre-arrival meeting can identify many latent failures.
Taking a lashing with bosun.
Surveyors for check your ship tanks, blankets on your...
More and more errors are made by shore persons. A key meeting is an excellent opportunity to spot where these might occur.
Before you move it, make sure the roustabouts are out of the way.
On this rig, every job is picked apart before they tackle it.
Before you pull them back.
They've learned the hard way to look out for each other. It's an excellent habit to develop. Many incidents would be prevented if we routinely cross-checked passage plans, loading plans and stability calculations, and lineups.
Remember, we're looking for a near-miss situation and what corrective actions they took.
A near miss is a golden opportunity to learn, but they won't come out unless everyone's certain they won't be blamed.
These type of boats are not checked out on like a annual basis or something.
That or somebody got in a hurry when they was working on the top.
Some owners encourage anonymous reports and send them round their fleet.
If a man is falling, it's just going to direct him straight down.
It's just going to bounce and rattle all the way down until it hits the bottom there. That's what, 90 foot?
Exactly.
No, that would have been it for him.
Yeah.
Human error can be overcome with communication, teamwork, and commitment, ideally from the top. There is no quick fix. Changing a culture can take years. But is there an alternative? Human error costs the industry $1 million a day.
Can you please tell me what you know about the accident?
The
Do you
real
hear him
costs
fall?
are higher still. Wasted time,
Do you hear him cry?
ruined reputations, lost business, lost jobs, even criminal proceedings. Worst of all, thousands of injuries and deaths.
Adam? Adam!
When lives, livelihoods, and the world we live in are all on the line, there's no room for error.